Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Experience the Power of Data for Fighting Fraud. This event is brought to you by Splunk in partnership with AWS. My name is James Hillier, glad to be hosting today's conversation, joined by Matthew Joseph. He is the Director for Security Specialization with Splunk. And if you're not familiar with the Splunk team, laser focused on digital resilience. They work to build a safer and more resilient digital world out there. They help SecOps teams and IOps, as well as engineering teams, really keep their organizations secure, keep them up, keep them running, and all. So we're glad to have him on board. And then from AWS, we have Ryan Orsi with us. He is a senior manager for Cloud Foundation COE, the Center of Excellence, and his team really does provide AWS partners with specialized programs with go-to-market support, such as things like Level 1 MSSP and cyber insurance competencies out there, hands-on guidance really to help them advance their areas of company security, identity governance, all those things. So we're glad to have these two guys on board. Couple of things that we're going to try and explore here in the next half hour or so. One, just a good old-fashioned State of the Union. What is the fraud landscape? How is it impacting all businesses out there? Talk a little bit about the life cycle of fraud. And then we want to talk about how Splunk and AWS not only team together, but also do that to help your organizations. And again, this is all about protecting data, protecting your customers, and getting a better handle on the fraud landscape. So that's what we plan to do here. With that, Matthew, I do want to turn to you first. I said a bit of a state of the union. We know that fraud is an issue. How big of an issue is it? What are you seeing these days?
Depends on who you ask. It's estimated to be a over $80 billion total addressable market. Some quote 125, even 200 billion. It's a lot, and the problem is our customers don't know what they don't know. In other words, the first question I'll usually ask is, what are we protecting? And the answer is data. Okay. Second question, where is that data? Get a lot of looks like a cow at a new gate is one saying. Just sort of deer in a headlight. Like, yeah, we need to fix that. We need to fix that problem because we have to visualize the data. So we have in real life, in the flesh world, we have security teams and fraud teams now merging together and reporting to the same structure because they realize they're looking at the same data and they need to be working together closer. The other sort of State of the Union thing is, okay, well, what happened with that incident? Well, that fraud happened because 6 months ago you were breached. 6 months ago, you were breached because 2 years ago you had an intern write that script and somebody rolled it into production. Like getting visibility into that timeline is really going to depend on individual and enterprise appetite for risk.
And really what you're bringing up there is when it is discovered, because it's no longer if your organization is going to be impacted. It's more likely when, but not even when it happened. It's when you discovered it.
Right.
And that's the point you're bringing up here. And again, I've been seeing more teams come together. Let me ask you on that. Fraud teams, security teams have been more siloed. Are you seeing a better coming together these days? Are those teams understanding they need to work together for the benefit of the companies?
Very much so. And it's data that's bringing them together. Also depends on the industry. Some, you've got your internal fraud, insider risk under the CFO. You've got a financial fraud under accounting. And then you've got, of course, cyber fraud under cybersecurity.
And fraud on the financial, the actual dollars, numbers, when people are perpetrating fraud, right? I think a lot of people think $500, that was fraud. $5,000, that was fraud. Not the half cent
Right.
spread across a million users, which is a ton of money, but something that often isn't seen. It's such a little trickle. I don't see that in my accounts, right? But that is also a big issue, correct?
Yeah, and so we take a crawl, walk, run, soar approach. So crawl is, what are we trying to solve? Okay, we're account takeover. Okay, let's look at the account data. Now we're monitoring that dashboard. Walk would be, okay, let's put some thresholds in there, some rules. Nobody should be able to finish this loan application in less than 4 minutes. Okay, great. Well, then what if we start running? What if we say, well, you know what? Somebody from Alaska can finish it in 4 minutes, but somebody in Texas can finish it in 3 minutes. Now, and you know what? A lot of fraud comes out of a certain state, let's add 50 automatic points or a red flag if we get a request from that state. So it's really, again, your appetite for risk, but then looking into the details and deciding, you know what, we can really divide all of this stuff up as specifically as we want to. We have that ability now with machine learning. The question is, do you have the time? And do you have appetite for risk?
And we'll talk more about that, of what time is included. How do we make some of these decisions? How do we prioritize and go after what first and all that? But Brian, before we get into any of that, let's have you build on top of this, right? That was the kind of Splunk view of the world from Matthew and team over there. What about the AWS? It's a larger exposure that the AWS eyes can see, because you are worldwide and you see so many of these trends.
Oh yes, yes, and Matthew's giving me like flashbacks in a life before AWS about needing to stitch that story together. Was personally responsible for things like that, Matthew. Of okay, something bad happened, and I just found out about it, and then how far back does the actual event occur? So, in from this new world, this new perspective that I'm in at AWS, running cloud foundations, and we kind of define that, as James said, as everything people need to operate whatever's running in their cloud environment. And that is definitely security and compliance and observability. And I would say from our perspective, we definitely see trends like, let's take payment fraud, for example. Online payment versus physical store payment fraud, we're seeing like at least 3x difference in magnitude of the universe of problems. Synthetic ID fraud, just another type of that vector. We're seeing that it really rise in popularity. And this is a kind of an issue of folks not really recognizing, to Matthew's first point, of where is the data. Type of data that I'm talking about would be personally identifiable information, or PII. Where is your PII across your enterprise? Bad actors are definitely scraping, querying, seeing what they can stitch together and to create, pulling from bits of real information and constructing a synthetic ID. So it's not a real human being, but it's based off of real history, real addresses, real phone numbers, and it's a new identity being created called a synthetic ID. We're seeing that problem really, really start to rise. Matthew already hit account takeover, very, very popular. We're just seeing the workflow, right? I think this would be one of the saving graces here, right? Is companies like Splunk, tied together with AWS, who has, like, I think what we offer to this whole equation is visibility, to the powerful algorithms and the software that Splunk has built on top. Full visibility is there. The workflow of that intern, as he said, right, creating the script, going through QA, regression testing. There is possibility through the power of the cloud to have visibility across all those workflows. It's just a matter of making sure at what I call like operationalizing that. You have to have three things in motion to operationalize it. You have to have people that understand how said thing works. You have to have tools in place to monitor the thing, and processes. You have to know, like, after step one comes step two, not before step three. So people, tools, and processes, fully operationalizing it.
And can I add like a 3+? Maybe a 4 almost. You also, I feel, you need that executive buy-in as well. So I asked Matthew, are fraud and security teams coming together in seeing the need to work? Are you seeing that there are enough leadership individuals across the board, across industries, that realize that they cannot delay any longer? If they've been putting any of this off, they can't, Ryan. They need to be on board here, and that buy-in is important for anything to move forward.
Oh, yes, I'd say from what I'm seeing, these are board level conversations officially. So no longer is IT just tucked under the CFO's office. No longer is security siloed in just the CISO's office, and no longer is like risk only in the chief risk officer's office. We're seeing the blend across those three power pillars in different companies really, collaborating. I wouldn't say like direct report structure may not be changing very much, but there's much more collaboration and a lot of less siloed activity happening out there.
I think one of the challenges there is, especially for public companies in the 10K, you have to sign, the CEO and the CFO have to sign it saying, I am not aware of any fraud, material or not, or else they could go to jail for 5 years and get fined $500,000. So the balance is, look, I'm the CEO. I don't want to know it, because if I know it, I got to act on it. But to Ryan's point, we are seeing this turn where people are like, you know what, we have the ability, we have the technology now to address this problem. Let's address it. It no longer needs to be in the closet. We no longer need to sweep it under the rug. We have one financial services customer over the course of 6 months, we saved them $55 million. $55 million. Like they didn't even know it was there, or somebody knew and was just like, you know what? Nope, can't deal with this right now.
Oh,
Now, 55 million is huge. There's some people that have never even seen a budget that large that are listening to us now. Are you able to see similar things for smaller orgs as well, saving them? Maybe it's hundreds of $1,000s, but that's huge for them because of the size of their org.
Actually, as there was a smaller credit union in Canada my team did not even work with them. The director for fraud, she, in her words, spun up a rudimentary dashboard, and they saved $3 million just because they were getting visibility into their data. 2 weeks later, they worked on some more, more advanced dashboard, saved another 6 million. And that was a smaller credit union. So yeah, to your point, this money going in and out, which is data, 92% of global currency is data. So where is the money going? Healthcare data is worth 10 times more than data labeled as money. So again, like where is all this data? Where is it going and how do I protect it? This is the crux of it, is you have to visualize the data. We don't have wet receptors. If I stuck my finger down here, I'm feeling the water and I go, it's wet. Actually, my brain is translating two different senses: change of texture, change of temperature. And my brain goes, oh, that's wet. That's why when you pull a cold sock out of the dryer, you think it might be wet. That's because we don't have data receptors, water receptors, sorry. Likewise, we don't have data receptors. We don't feel data, we don't smell it, but we operate day to day using multiple senses in this 3D world. So walking down the street, I'm using proprioception, sense of direction, sight, sense of smell if I'm looking for a particular restaurant or something. Just to walk down the street. But you're going to
So
run a
how
multi-billion dollar organization off of one sense alone, and you're going to tell me that you don't need to visualize your data? It makes no sense.
Ryan, it's about that insight. And again, that's what AWS is known for in terms of being able to really open up, peel back the onion, so to say, on that data and see the information. So let's talk a little bit about all of this in terms of how we can see things. And I love where you were going, Matthew, with fine, us as human beings, but what are then the sensors that we have available to us now digitally to see, sniff, smell, find that fraud?
well, and I think the sensory the senses are a bit different in the cloud world as we're compared to like the traditional, I guess, dare we say, the on-premises world or not non-cloud world, right? But Matthew's spot on about visualizing or sensing in some way that your data is here, the type of data. Oh, there's something highly sensitive in it. So highly sensitive data, the classifications of it, there's a whole data strategy that we could go down a bit of a rabbit hole on. But that is a superpower of AWS for all of our partners, including Splunk and the customers that utilize both of our products. We can accurately determine there's something sensitive in this area of your cloud running this application, and of course, tools like Splunk are able to connect that. That's just a raw data stream, right? It might be CloudTrail, CloudWatch, or something producing the actual like underlying log information. The log information and rows of tables. I don't know if you've been in those jobs before, James, but that doesn't make you sense it and see it that well. Just a scrolling for miles with your mouse wheel, rows of logs, doesn't make you feel like, oh, there's something hot here, I need to take care of it. And that's what we really are coming together to solve, is like Splunk can actually give you that sensory connection. We're going to give you the accuracy of the data, where it is, what's inside of it, if there's something looking even malicious or suspicious. We actually have some capabilities now and just natively in the cloud to tell you that this particular file or file type or DNS domain or IP address activity accessing your application is of like a potentially known bad actor. So that's kind of where we're coming from.
Well, and I want to dive into a little more of the visualization aspect. Luckily, I've been a media guy my entire life, but I can draw an analogy if I'm working on audio. If something is in the green for an audio level, I know that's good.
Right.
Starts getting into the yellow, I'm a little concerned. When I'm peaked out in red, that's a problem. I'm going to have to go back and address that audio, as opposed to just looking at a script, a printout of what someone said on an audio or video project, right? There is no, okay, I can see the words, but I don't really know, was Matthew really excited about that concept, or was he kind of worrisome or whatever? And those are all the things that you're seeming to talk about, if I'm getting the analogy here correctly.
Well,
And going back
James,
to, it sounds like reading through Excel spreadsheets for data, which you're going to miss things. You're going to get tunnel vision. You don't understand the small nuances, right? And that's what we're talking about in terms of visualizing what this looks like, Matthew. It's looking for the nuance and then directing either the humans or eventually machine learning AI to see those nuances and then, escalate and alert and obviously remediate at some point.
I mean, James, when you're editing, you are taking data and manipulating it to draw emotion in people. I mean, that's what I'm really longing for in security and fraud and compliance is something that we can interact with that will, it will help retain talent and it'll drive down alert fatigue. Being able to really enjoy going to work and looking at something instead of like Ryan said, just staring at endless scrolling doom of spreadsheets.
Do you get that feedback that folks that have gone the Splunk route, all of a sudden it's just such a new way of doing things and new way of approaching their job that there is a bit of a, whoa, okay, I could do this for a little while longer, right? There's finally some innovation here.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got our customers have access to about 60 different free workshops, and one of them is called Boss of the Sock. And that's where we have gamified threat hunting, gamified searching for fraud, searching for compliance. Give me the name of the person that plugged in the USB device. Now you got to search through the logs. So we also have customers that are leveraging the machine learning toolkit. And let me just real quick take a sidestep and define AI. I was of the subscription for that it's the Turing test, passing the Turing test. We now have a VP of AI at Splunk who's redefined it as the umbrella under which generative AI, deep learning, and machine learning sit. I have asked him, I'm lobbying him to add automation. So using that definition, our customers are leveraging AI to do things like clustering, anomaly detection, predictive analytics, because it's a representation of human behavior. And that's really what we're after. It's not necessarily, I don't care about good guys, bad guys, adversary, friend, friend or foe. I want wanted or unwanted behavior. I've been at Splunk for almost 10 years. And let's just say, I don't like my job anymore. And my email, I do. I love my job. I love my job. But my email usage is going down. My Slack usage is going down. Usually I log in every day at 8 o'clock. Now it's like 9:30. We can look at this data and say, hey, there's an outlier. What HR can do with what's called a stay meeting, because it's less expensive to retain an employee or customer than it is to gain a new one. So HR can then reach out to me or the person in question and say, hey, what's going on? Oh, well, I have a loved one in the hospital. I'm really distracted. Oh, well, we have these HR programs that take 6 weeks off or whatever it is. Now we're being more proactive. Now we're truly being more proactive, looking at these indicators, not just of compromise, but of potential compromise.
And what you're talking about here, we're not going to go too far down. We could go into a big old AI rabbit hole, but this is where technologies really augmenting and supporting the work that we're all still doing, not taking the jobs away.
Absolutely.
And again, why, I guess, Ryan, maybe I'll pose this to you on a technical front. Why would we bother coming up with cool dashboards, putting in data, having good visualization, maybe shades of colors, maybe graphs? You don't need to do that for a computer. They talk ones and zeros, but we're doing it to support the people.
Maybe the computers like the colors. I'm just kidding. No, you're right. And you're touching on my philosophical heartstrings here. So my personal opinion, humans will always be in the loop. Human in the loop. You probably heard that term many times out there in the tech space. Along with fraud and cybersecurity, there was initially some very thought-provoking questions when we first started to see what AI can really do out there in the wild. And in the case of take like the security analyst or the fraud analyst for the boss of the SOC exercise, find me the person that plugged in the USB stick. That can just be an injection into like a prompt engineering question, right? Just prompt the bot to go find that. But you still have to have somebody to interpret what to do with that outcome and whether or not the end result is truly accurate. So I still feel like human in the loop is still required. I haven't met a person yet in a position of control of their company, let's say a fireable position, that will 100% of the time take the AI recommended remediation action from a fraud alert or a security alert. Not 100% of the time. Simple stuff, bad IP address, add to the ACL on the firewall. Absolutely, everyone does that all day, every day. But beyond that, I think the colors, the visuals, the UX, the user experience, we're still designing that for that human that's still in the loop.
Yeah, so to just touch on that, what we've done is right now we're working, this is a forward-looking statement. We're working on leveraging hundreds of thousands of data source variables and fields to cluster them and visualize it in 3D, but then like Ryan, like you're saying, add color to give it sort of a fourth dimensional feel. It's still a static picture. We can pivot on it and turn it and stuff like that. But ideally, I want to see a video. I want to see CCTV, the YouTube of my logs to figure out what the heck happened. And yeah, we're just not there yet, but I can see us getting there.
Ooh, I want you to get there. That sounds fun. I want to check that out, Matthew.
Speaking of images, there was something that I want to take just a brief moment on because I do want to go back and talk about some of the savings and seeing kind of what organizations are doing now to become more modern on fraud detection, remediation, and kind of what can maybe paint a little future-looking vision for the folks that are listening to us today. But I had mentioned that one of the things in the beginning here, as I was laying out our agenda, the life cycle of fraud, and it doesn't just happen at one point along the continuum. It can happen at multiple points and stuff like that. How well do people understand, Ryan, all the various points and kind of the life cycle that's going on out there? Because things do change so often and they have their other job. And it just seems like there is a lot to consider when looking at this overall idea of fraud and where things can kind of impact organizations.
Yeah, I think you're asking the right question. I think my answer might take us in a new direction, but I feel like the answer is unique to an industry, and it's only classified as fraud when it finally becomes known that there was a financial impact. In terms of life cycle, nearly all the time it begins with some data. To go back to Matthew's first point, some data was put into the wrong hands. It was either purposefully exfiltrated, accidentally exfiltrated, but it was exfiltrated. And the type of data, it's user account information or it's credentials, right? So it always starts with some sort of loss of data. It's not quite yet fraud, right? That's in the beginning of the life cycle. There needs to be the next phase of that life cycle has to have some sort of way for that bad actor to now exploit financial gain for them, financial loss, unfortunately, for our mutual customers here on the webinar. Then it becomes fraud. Then it becomes like an actual quantifiable, and that's something that's, being from a security background in my history, quantifying in dollars or local currency, wherever you're dialing in from today. That could be some of your biggest challenges. If you're a security or fraud leader of your company, I think that's actually a big step forward we've all achieved is now we can absolutely, there's fraud teams, fraud departments. We can quantify, to Matthew's few examples of $3 million savings, then to 6 on a dashboard, the exact financial impact. That's important to be able to identify. The end of that life cycle, in my opinion, is root cause analysis and remediation. So again, if you don't have visibility into what exactly was taken or accidentally let out into the wild, you're not exactly going to know 100% certainty of what action to take to prevent that from happening again. So visibility is key from the entire life cycle, which means logging in general. I really hate to see people making terrible trade-offs between cost of logging everything and feeling like they're overwhelmed and alert fatigue. That's like one end of the spectrum. And the other end is like, let's optimize what we're logging. I think you need to have everything on, but it's up to you to implement the right tools, people, and process to make sure you don't get lost in the ocean, right? So that when something truly alarming happens, you know about it.
And part of that sounds like it's not just fraud and addressing all these issues is not a one and done. You don't just put a lock on the door and walk away, right? It's a constant evolution. You have to constantly either be doing it yourself or finding those partners out there, wink, wink, nod, nod, that are able to do that with you and walk you through and guide you through that process because it's not just a set it, forget it.
Yeah. And also just to touch on the cost with what Ryan was saying, and those numbers that I quoted earlier, those are the raw numbers. LexisNexis estimates that every dollar lost in fraud is really $4 because you have to get the lawyers involved, the network admins. You're spending 2 weeks trying to figure out where that gift card went. So really, if you're saving $1 on fraud, you're really saving four.
On the money front for organizations and what they might need to be spending, I don't find that every single organization is just ready to go and get this done. The investment is going to have to be made. Matthew first, and Ryan maybe from that larger sphere. Matthew, what are you seeing in terms of the willingness to invest and how teams are coming about looking at what is the risk? What is the potential for that fraud to damage them monetarily, damage their reputation? And are they willing to make those investments now? Is that getting prioritized? And again, you've thrown out a couple of numbers that teams have saved on. Are those generally across the board the types of big savings that teams are seeing?
Yeah, especially. So oddly enough, a lot of the financial services I work with and some retail they're just doing business. Like they just got to do the business. And I really don't have time for this right now. I know it's there, but it's not an issue right now. If it becomes one, then I'll address it. Interestingly, on the gaming and entertainment side, tickets, concerts, stuff like that, they've got it locked down. They are really mature in their fraud posture. So you've got those two ends of the spectrum, and then yeah, we've got all those people in the middle that they don't know what they don't know. They don't know how to do it. To Ryan's point, like when does it become fraud? Ransomware, spam, technically is electronic fraud. So you don't get arrested for ransomware. You get arrested and charged with electronic fraud, wire fraud. So if that's the case, then ransomware is really fraud in and of itself. And I have the word security in my title. I am corruptible. I have a number and I will click on stuff. I just will because marketing always wins. Marketing has the budget and they're saying, click here to finish your test, click here to get your ticket, click here for your discount, click here, click, click, click. No, not there. Oh, but everything's moving at the speed of light. So now we've got to do segmentation. Now we're being reactive. I don't think twice a year anti-phishing training is going to fix that. So to Ryan's point about people, process, technology, people are the threat. What's the next big threat? People. What about after that? Still people. It's always going to be people.
And it doesn't necessarily mean the bad actor people. It could be, it's just us clicking, as you were saying, just, oh, shoot, I
It
wish I
just
could get that
clicks.
back, but I can't.
Yeah.
Ryan, in terms of some of the investments there, because that's what organizations are going to need. If they want to have modern fraud detection, modern data protection, there is an investment that needs to be made.
And there's a business case that has to be made. And actually, this is some measurable percent of my day, my team's day, is actually on this exact topic, like helping companies like Splunk and they're some of their major customers come up with that business case. It's the equation sounds simple, the details are more complicated, right? But hey, board, we feel we need to invest in X amount of dollars in order to save this amount of dollars, and we also have reason to believe that we're going to implement a continuous fraud detection, or the way I like to call it sometimes is just continuous compliance. Almost every organization out there has to adhere to some kind of regulatory compliance. And so, the old days of checking PCI like once a year, every 6 months, checking your dashboard to see how you're doing, those are the old days. You really need to have more of a continuous compliance monitoring. And that continuous aspect, I find, is one of the key pillars that sort of pushes the investment over into the go for it sort of range instead of, because I think the boards around these companies, they know there's an issue. They know now you can quantify it and measure it. They're willing to spend some money, but they want to make sure what they're spending money on is not just a one-time fix. And that's been a very loud and clear message we've been picking up from everyone around the world. And that's why we would argue like continuous compliance, continuous fraud detection and remediation would be like part of that core investment strategy.
I think also just to touch on that, it's really toned from the top. So if your CEO is cheating on his expense reports, chances are there's a lot of people cheating on their expense reports. You have to get sign in from the board and from the leadership, the executive leadership, that we don't like fraud. We have a risk management framework. We have a risk management policy that's no longer than a paragraph and is easily readable by somebody with a ninth grade education. Like starting with something like that sends the message. We are serious about this and we will not tolerate fraud in our environment.
You guys up for a little rapid fire? And I don't mean like 1 or 2 word answers, but just shorter answers because we have gone into detail on a few things. But you guys up for that?
Yeah, let's talk about AI again.
All right, I'll save that for last. That way, if we keep going long, that's fine. But let me do the Matthew. I'll start with you. We talked fraud. There are internal risks. There are external risks. Is it a 50-50? You have to look at them equally. Do you put 60-40? What do you see in general?
I I would say look at them separately and then together. So 100% on both, but I'm going to look at my internal people differently. Like I mentioned before, I might get HR involved. Maybe they don't know that they were involved in a fraud. They were actually getting tricked themselves. We had one customer that we did a fraud workshop, and then just at the end we had an extra time, so we analyzed the analysts. And out of like 25 analysts, they all roughly did 8 to 9 cases a day, about an hour a case, except for one who did like 23, 24 a day. And they were like, yeah, that's our rock star. I was like, is she? And they looked into it and she was actually involved in the fraud. So you can take numbers and be like, oh no, that's our rock star. Actually, that's an anomaly and it warrants some sort of investigation.
And Ryan, that's where, again, the power of AWS, of data, of insights, right? That'll, assuming, help people determine we need to spend a little more time now looking on the internal or now on the external or what have you, right? I'm assuming it varies for a lot of organizations from time to time, month to month, seasonal activities for if they're retail versus tax preparation, that type of thing.
Yeah, your anomalous behavior detection algorithms, Splunk's a genius at this. But what's anomalous is going to be different for internal users versus external. I think that's the key thing that we're hitting at here. And like, externally, you don't know what to expect. You don't know the behavior. So you're tuning your detection methods and your alerts and you're filtering a lot different than internally. You know what normal is. You know what working hours are, systems people should have access to. Hopefully you've adopted a least privilege access policy for users and you see them trying to make attempts to log in to something they don't have access to with no legitimate reason. It's a much easier, it's like, I shouldn't say easier, but it's clear when something is anomalous on the inside.
Crystal ball. Short, but sweet. What are you guys seeing? You're on the front lines out there. So, Matthew, what is something that you're spending a little more time looking at on the fraud landscape? What either a newer type of fraud coming at us, an area that maybe hasn't been exploited as much recently, but might be an area because we're getting good protecting here. So the bad guys are moving here. What do you see on the down the road that we should be aware of, start thinking about in terms of fraud?
Synthetic fraud, definitely, like Ryan mentioned. It started out. I first heard about it like 10 years ago, and it wasn't prevalent everywhere. And yeah, it's growing. Uh, Secondly, I would say that the adversaries are not coming up with new ideas. So for phishing, for example, it's still the same old fish kit. They just figured out a different way to get you to it. So now, hey, scan this QR code. Now you're completely off the organization's network, bypassing every single security measure that has been put into place. So it's sort of new, I guess, techniques, but less new back end.
And just more sophisticated now. I mean, you
Oh,
and I,
yeah.
probably the three of us could probably, and everyone on the line, we knew those junky phishing emails. We could see the logo was wrong, the font was wrong, the color was wrong, and all that. And I wouldn't put $1 betting that I could figure out one of those now. They're just too sophisticated.
Well, now they're also leveraging human behavior against us. So, hey, James, I'm with the IRS. Look, it's only $250, but if you don't pay it now, you're going to jail. Hey, Ryan, I'm a police officer in your local community, and I figured, I got your address and stuff. there's a warrant out for your arrest. If you leave your house, you're going to be arrested. So look, we can take care of this right now, though. Otherwise, you got to go down to court, stand in line. God, the last thing I want to do is go to like the DMV or court. Yeah, here's 300
Right.
bucks.
Ryan, what's on your radar? What are you looking at, either personally within your center of excellence or a larger initiative within AWS that you're looking at on the fraud front?
I don't want to give people too many ideas.
Fair enough.
Just we're ahead of this, but like look at the cybersecurity kill chain. Starts with usually reconnaissance. We're seeing, let's say bad actors out there leveraging the power of AI also for not great things, right? And so doing reconnaissance to figure out where this user data they came across, again, from some kind of data exfiltration, where can I use it? Where can I use it to exploit something? That reconnaissance measurement, that whole process is speeding up. And the faster that the bad actor can find where they can leverage the data they have been able to take or buy or get from the dark web or wherever they got it from, the faster they can figure out where to go with that, the more increasing fraud people are going to experience, or fraud attempts. So there are countermeasures for that, absolutely, right? With a new element in the world, wind, water, fire, AI. There's always tools that'll be crafted for good use and not so great use. And so there's definitely countermeasures. We're on top of it with folks like Splunk. Look forward for more information later this year.
And Matthew, that does lead into a little more, and I'll give you like 2 minutes here on the AI front. Give you an AI soapbox, but what Ryan was saying was the case, and we've seen this in other advancements in technology. But here, great, we can maybe use some AI and machine learning to get better to protect ourselves, but bad guys are going to use it too. And they're going to try and use that against us. And in fact, they're usually the ones that start using it against us. And then as an industries, we've played catch up a little bit. Talk a little bit, take it where you want. AI, machine learning, how it's helping, where the battle's going to be.
So like we talked about earlier, we don't feel data. So we have to visualize it. So being able to visualize anomalies over large sets of data is what we can use AI for. And I think this is the one part where we actually have the benefit. We have the upper hand. Things like, oh, I've got compliance to worry about. I have PCI to worry about. Those things hinder me from moving, whereas the adversaries don't. They don't have compliance, so they just do whatever they want. But like you said, they have to go out looking for this data. We have all of the data. The challenge, again, is people. We have to I've sat in meetings before where I had to explain to the data keepers what the fraud team wanted to do with the data. They work for the same company. I'm just negotiating. It's your own data. So imagine being able to type in, instead of having to craft an SPL, Splunk processing language, an SPL query, I can just type in normal language. How many emails came from North Korea yesterday with attachments and were opened? Here's all the people. Shut down their accounts. Send them to remediation training again. This is something that we can do. And you know what it does? It saves time. Ultimately, if I'm a salesperson, I sell time. Because on our deathbeds, the greatest regret we have is not spending time with friends and family. Nobody ever said, oh, the spreadsheet. No one. So I'm genuinely interested in getting my customers home on the early train. That way they can save time. And I think AI is going to help us do this.
You guys, this has been fun. This is one of those conversations that we get into, and all of a sudden we're like, wow, it's been about 40 minutes or so, and that's what we had planned, and we could go on for like hours. But what I appreciate is I think in this conversation, we've demonstrated, one, Splunk and AWS together, right? And that is important. Obviously, you guys both have this great knowledge and understanding of where things are now, where it's going, and how to work with the people, because as you both had been bringing up, right, the people aspect is still and always has been the hardest thing to change there, and that we're going to have to continue working on that. Hopefully the conversation for all of you people out there gave you some additional things to think about in just the whole landscape of fraud and detection and what's going on out there, and how to maybe make it more attainable to some of your employees to understand, where is this fraud? Maybe make it sexy again, because look, spreadsheets, not that sexy, but if you can visualize things, if you can get energized about the work you're doing, often we do better work when we're more engaged there. And that's also part of the story that I'm hearing from the Splunk team and what they do with their customers out there. So, folks, there is an essential guide to fraud. It is available to all of you to download. So I encourage you to get your hands on that. That'll continue kind of your research and timing on that. You can also reach out to the Splunk team and get more information. You can set up some phone calls and meetings with them if you wish as well. With that, we are going to wrap things up on behalf of the teams over at Splunk and AWS, specifically, of course, Matthew and Ryan here. Appreciate you all joining us. My name is James Hilliard, and we do look forward to talking to you all down the road.